What if I told you that the doubt living in your mind isn't yours at all? That it wasn't born with you, crafted from your bones, or written in your DNA? What if I told you that it was installed, not by truth, not by evidence, but by repetition? By years upon years of hearing what couldn't be done, of watching others settle for scraps when they deserved feasts, of witnessing powerful men shrink themselves to fit into small cages built by fear. What if I told you that every hesitation you've carried like a stone in your chest, every quiet voice that whispered you should wait, hold back, question your own strength? What if I told you none of that was ever yours to begin with? It was borrowed, programmed, repeated like a broken record, until you accepted it as gospel. But it was never born from your spirit. Because you, my friend, you were not made to question yourself into paralysis. You were made to build empires. You were made to rise like the sun, inevitable and unstoppable. You were made to win. Not eventually, not someday when the stars align perfectly, not when everyone gives you permission, but now, in this very moment, with whatever tools you have in your hands. And if you stay with me, not halfway listening while your mind wanders, not half present while doubt whispers its familiar lies, but fully here, breathing these words into your bones, speaking them aloud until they echo in your soul, returning to them daily like a man returning to his altar, then something will begin to shift. Not in theory, not in your imagination, but in your very identity, in the core of who you are. Because what I'm about to give you is not a motivational talk designed to make you feel good for an hour. This is a reprogramming, a complete recalibration of the operating system that has quietly allowed doubt to drive your life for far too long. And when it's over, when the last word has penetrated your consciousness, you will no longer recognize the version of yourself that accepted smallness as fate, that bowed to limitation, that apologized for dreaming. Because doubt, as I will prove to you beyond question, is nothing more than a habit, a mental routine you've practiced until it became automatic. And habits, my friend, can be broken with the same force they were built, through repetition. But belief. Belief is something far more powerful. Belief is a decision, a choice, an act of rebellion against a world that taught you to shrink. Belief is the act of remembering who you were before the world got its hands on you, before teachers told you to be realistic, before parents told you to play it safe, before society convinced you that your fire was dangerous and needed to be contained. Today, we return to that man, the one who knew without question he was meant for more, who didn't wait for proof to take the first step, who acted as if victory was not just possible but inevitable. And let me tell you something most men never hear, something that will shake you awake if you let it. That man, that powerful, unstoppable, fearless man, is still inside you. He's been waiting, watching, wondering when you'll stop listening to the voice of limitation and start moving like the builder you were born to be. So say it with me now, and mean it with every fiber of your being. I was not made to doubt. I was made to win. Say it louder. Let it break through the walls of hesitation. I was not made to question endlessly. I was made to decide and act. Say it until your voice shakes off the dust of years of holding back. I do not wait for courage to find me. I move anyway, and courage follows. Because today, we are not here to play games with belief. We are here to make it law, unbreakable, unchangeable law. And once you've written that law into your mind, into your body, into your voice, into your very presence, the results must follow. The universe has no choice but but to bend to a man who knows who he is. So stay with me from this first word to the final breath, and let's begin the process of burning doubt out of your identity forever. Let me be crystal clear about something that will change everything for you. You were not born with doubt coursing through your veins. No man ever has been. Doubt is not hardwired into your DNA. It's not a natural instinct passed down through generations. It is a condition, a mental disease picked up from your environment, a parasite that grows fat only when fed a steady diet of limitation and fear. And this world, my friend, is crawling with feeders, people who will gladly pour their own limitations into your mind if you let them. You entered this world with curiosity burning in your eyes, with hunger driving your every movement, with fire in your belly that couldn't be contained. No child comes into existence second-guessing himself. Watch any young boy discovering the world around him. He doesn't wonder if he has permission to walk. He tries, falls, gets up, tries again. He doesn't ask if he's qualified to explore. He moves toward whatever catches his interest. He falls and rises, screams and reaches, not because he's certain of the outcome, but because fear hasn't been installed yet. Doubt is not natural. It is taught. It is modeled by adults who forgot their own power. It is repeated in classrooms where children are told to color inside the lines. It is reinforced by a society that profits from keeping people small, manageable, predictable. By the time you reach manhood, you've been programmed, directly and indirectly, to believe that your power is dangerous, that your fire must be tamed, that dreaming big is for other people, not for you. But here's the truth that will set you free. If doubt was learned, then belief can be built. If limitation was installed, then power can be restored. And that restoration begins with one simple act of rebellion, rejecting the lie that you must be hesitant just because everyone around you chose to be. Let me show you how this worked in the lives of men who refused to accept the world's programming. Henry Ford was not born into privilege. He had no Ivy League education, no family fortune, no connections in high places. Yet he refused to learn the language of limitation. When the entire world told him his vision of putting America on wheels was pure madness, he responded not with doubt, but with action that shook the foundations of industry. His own engineers, men with more formal education, more credentials, more supposed expertise, told him it was impossible to build an 8-cylinder engine in a single block. The technology didn't exist. The materials wouldn't hold. It had never been done. And what did Ford say? Produce it anyway. Not once, not twice, but every single time they returned with failure, Ford repeated those same 3 words. Produce it anyway. That wasn't genius speaking. That wasn't luck or some mysterious gift. That was belief so deeply installed, so completely unshakable, that impossibility couldn't find a foothold. Ford had trained his mind to obey his vision rather than his environment. He had systematically unlearned doubt and replaced it with decision. And that decision became law, not just for him, but for the entire industry he revolutionized. Or consider Thomas Edison, who didn't fail once or 10 times, but over 10,000 times in his pursuit of the electric light. 10,000 failures. 10,000 moments where doubt could have seized control and convinced him to quit. 10,000 opportunities for the voice of limitation to whisper that maybe he wasn't cut out for this kind of work. But Edison didn't entertain doubt for a single second, because he had built something infinitely stronger than hope or optimism. He had built identity. He didn't say, maybe I can figure this out. He declared, I am the man who will illuminate the world. And that identity became armor, protecting him from the sting of temporary failure. Every time a test didn't work, he didn't internalize it as evidence of his inadequacy. He moved forward because his belief wasn't rooted in external evidence. It was rooted in internal repetition. He had told himself again and again, with the force of absolute conviction, that this would work, that he would work, that something would break through. And because he repeated that truth daily, his subconscious had no choice but to make it reality. You must understand this fundamental principle. Belief is not a feeling that floats down from heaven when you meditate long enough. It's not something you stumble into by accident. It is built the same way a skyscraper is built, the same way a habit is formed, through consistent, daily acts of decision and discipline. You choose belief even when you don't feel it. You repeat belief even when your old programming screams in protest. You walk and talk and act like the man who knows his destiny is assured, even when part of you still questions, until that questioning part is starved into silence. That's what Andrew Carnegie understood when he pulled himself from poverty to become the richest man in America. When I studied his methods, when I sat with him and absorbed his wisdom, I discovered something that changed the trajectory of my entire life. Carnegie didn't see belief as optional or nice to have. He saw it as structural, as foundational as the steel he forged. He once told me, "Napoleon, if a man does not command his own mind, someone else will." And that's exactly what doubt is, a sign that you've surrendered command of your mental kingdom. Not consciously, not deliberately, but gradually, in small surrenders and tiny compromises, you've allowed doubt to set policy in the empire of your mind. But that reign of terror ends today, because now you are awake. Now you understand the true origin of the doubt you've been carrying like chains around your ankles. It wasn't born with you. It was given to you by people who had forgotten their own power. And now you're giving it back. Say this out loud with the force of a man reclaiming his birthright. Doubt is not mine. I refuse to carry what was never mine to bear. Say it again with even more conviction. I do not live by hesitation. I live by decision, by action, by the fire that burns in every man who remembers who he really is. This is how transformation begins, not by feeling powerful first, but by speaking power until feeling catches up, by walking with the posture of certainty, even before certainty has taken deep root. Because the subconscious mind doesn't obey logic or reason. It obeys repetition, consistency, and emotional intensity. Every time you move like a builder instead of a doubter, every time you speak like a leader instead of a follower, every time you act like the winner you were born to be, you are laying new track in your mental railroad. You are building belief one choice at a time, one word at a time, one action at a time. The man you were meant to become, he's not some distant possibility waiting for the right circumstances. He's already within you, complete and ready, just waiting for the mental noise to stop. He's waiting for you to give the command to rise, to take his rightful place in the driver's seat of your life. And this moment, right here, right now, this is when you give that command. Let me take you now to the most powerful moment in any man's existence. The moment he makes a decision so clear, so permanent, so absolutely final, that his old self cannot survive it. Because here is a truth that will revolutionize your life if you grasp it. Identity is not something you discover by looking inward or waiting for inspiration. Identity is something you decide, declare, and then defend with your life. You do not stumble into greatness by accident. You do not wait to become confident and then start acting confidently. You do not hope that someday you'll feel fearless before you begin taking fearless action. No. You decide that from this moment forward, confidence will be your default posture, courage will be your natural state, and greatness will be your only acceptable destination. Every man alive operates from within an identity, but most men are living inside an identity they never consciously chose. They're operating from a self-concept built from accidents, from other people's limitations, from fear disguised as realism, from the small opinions of small minds who never dared to dream beyond their own mediocrity. Because they never took control of their identity, they've become a walking contradiction, powerful in potential but paralyzed in practice, dreaming of more but settling for less, knowing they were meant for greatness, but accepting ordinary as their lot in life. But every great man I studied, every titan who carved his name into the granite of history, did one thing before anything else became possible. They decided who they were, not based on their circumstances, not based on their feelings, not based on what others thought was realistic for someone like them, but based purely on their vision of what was possible. Let me take you back to Henry Ford before he became the titan of industry who revolutionized transportation. Before the Model T, before the assembly line, before he became one of the richest men who ever lived, Ford was just another mechanic working with his hands. But one day, he made a decision that changed everything. He decided he would build a car that every common man in America could afford. That was it. One sentence, one commitment, one line drawn in the sand of possibility. But once that decision crystallized in his mind, everything about Henry Ford changed. He no longer thought like a mechanic. He no longer acted like a worker. He no longer accepted the limitations that seemed so real to everyone else. He became, in his mind first, and then in reality, a builder of machines, of ideas, of an entirely new future that only he could see. And when the world doubted him, when bankers called him crazy, when engineers said his ideas were impossible, when newspapers mocked his vision, Ford didn't bend, didn't compromise, didn't explain or apologize. Why? Because his identity had been decided. He had chosen who he was, and once a man makes that choice with absolute finality, the world loses its power to define him, limit him, or break him. Thomas Edison lived by the same principle. Do you imagine that Edison became the most prolific inventor in history by accident? Do you think the light bulb, the phonograph, the motion picture camera were happy accidents that fell into his lap? Absolutely not. Long before the world believed in him, Edison had decided who he was. He didn't say, "I hope I can invent something useful." He declared, "I will illuminate the world. I will capture sound and play it back. I will make pictures move." And then, with the identity of a world changer firmly planted in his consciousness, he began walking toward those visions every single day. When others called him a dreamer, when failure visited him like a faithful friend, when results refused to come for months and years, he kept moving forward. Why? Because in his mind, the results had already happened. He wasn't trying to become an inventor. He was an inventor, simply catching his reality up to his identity. Do you see what I'm telling you? Results follow identity, not the other way around. If you believe you must prove yourself worthy before you can claim greatness, you've got it backwards, and you'll spend your entire life chasing your own tail. The men who rise, who build, who leave their mark on history, they are men who decide to rise first in the privacy of their own minds, first in the silence of their own hearts, first without a shred of external evidence that it's even possible. Even Abraham Lincoln, walking through the fire of civil war and national division, was not led by polls or public opinion. He was led by an identity he had chosen in advance. He had determined, with unshakable conviction, the value of human freedom, the weight of national unity, the sacred dignity of every human soul. Because that decision was final, because his identity as the great emancipator was sealed before circumstances demanded it, fear could not break him. Criticism could not stop him. The enormous pressure of leading a nation through its darkest hour could not crush him. Now it is your turn. The time for drifting is over. The time for wondering who you might become if circumstances were different has ended. You must write your identity not in sand where the wind can erase it, not in pencil where fear can edit it, but in stone. Permanent, unchangeable, non-negotiable. Who are you? Who have you decided to be? Not who you've been up to this point, because the past is dead and buried. Not who others think you should be, because their limitations are not your laws. But who do you choose to be from this moment forward? You must declare it with the force of a man planting a flag on conquered territory. I am not a man of hesitation. I am a man of execution. I do not drift between identities like a leaf in the wind. I have chosen one, and I walk in it with unwavering certainty. I do not apologize for my ambition or explain away my power. And you cannot say this once and expect transformation. You must repeat it until your subconscious hears it so often, so clearly, with such emotional intensity that it accepts it as unbreakable law. That is how belief becomes identity. That is how decision becomes destiny. Let me give you the same ritual I witnessed in the lives of Carnegie, Edison, Ford, and every other man who refused to accept limitation as his master. Every morning, before the world speaks its doubts into your ear, you speak first. You declare who you are, not with hope, not with wishes, but with the authority of a king issuing a royal decree. You write your identity, you speak your identity, you move in perfect alignment with your identity, even when you don't feel like it yet. Because feeling follows form. You must form the new identity through repetition and discipline, and the emotion will rise to support it like steel reinforcing concrete. Carnegie used to tell his protégés, "A man's habits are simply his beliefs in motion." And what are habits but repeated actions born from a chosen identity? The man who sees himself as a king doesn't move like a servant. The man who has decided he's a leader doesn't wait for consensus before he acts. The man who knows he was born to win doesn't waste time flirting with doubt. So I ask you now, with the full weight of destiny hanging in the balance, what have you been waiting to decide? What version of yourself have you postponed out of fear or false humility? What identity are you pretending is too big, too bold, too ambitious for someone like you? Let that cowardice end here, in this moment. Today, you decide. Today, you write the new name, declare the new frame, embrace the new game. You burn every bridge to the old, limited version of yourself and never look back. From this moment forward, you do not doubt, you decide. You do not hesitate, you act. You do not explain your power, you execute it. And the world, seeing a man who knows who he is, has no choice but to adjust to your new reality. There comes a moment in every man's journey when the greatest progress is made not by taking a new step forward, but by cutting off every possible way back. You see, movement without total commitment is not progress. It's just expensive dabbling. It's dipping your toe into the ocean of possibility while keeping one foot firmly planted on the shore of mediocrity. But no empire was ever built by a man who hedged his bets. No legacy was ever written by someone who kept an escape route open just in case the path got difficult. No transformation ever occurred in a man who refused to burn his bridges to his old, limited self. The titans I studied, Carnegie, Edison, Ford, Lincoln, they all understood a truth that separated them from the masses. If you leave the bridge standing behind you, fear will always tempt you to cross back to safety when the pressure mounts. The phrase, "burn the boats," has become a cliché in our time. But it was no cliché for the men who lived it as a matter of life and death. Let me paint you a picture from history that will burn this principle into your soul. In 1519, Spanish conquistador Hernán Cortés landed on the shores of Mexico with a small band of men to face the mighty Aztec Empire, an empire that vastly outnumbered his forces. Conventional wisdom said he was marching to certain death. But upon reaching those shores, what did Cortés do? He ordered his men to burn every ship that had brought them there, not because he was reckless or suicidal, but because he understood human nature better than most. When the mind believes there's an easy way out, it never fully commits to the difficult way forward. When his men looked back and saw smoke rising from their only means of retreat, something powerful happened in their psychology. Suddenly, conquest wasn't just an option, it was the only option. Victory wasn't just preferable, it was absolutely necessary for survival. And that necessity forged them into an unstoppable force. Now, I do not romanticize conquest or violence, but the principle remains timeless and true. You must destroy the exit if you want to force destiny to open the door ahead. This law operates not just in war, but in every area of your life where greatness is possible. Henry Ford didn't say, "We'll experiment with this automobile idea, and if it doesn't work out, we'll go back to making better carriages." When he committed to the Model T, he shut down production of every other model his company was producing, against the advice of his board, against the protests of his investors, against the wisdom of his peers. He simplified, streamlined, and focused everything on one vision. Why? Because there was no retreat available. Ford didn't seek comfort. He sought completion. He didn't want options. He wanted results. And by eliminating every alternative, he created the focus necessary to revolutionize manufacturing and put America on wheels. Thomas Edison operated by the same principle. When he set out to create a functioning light bulb, he didn't maintain a backup career as a telegraph operator just in case invention didn't pan out. He committed everything, his time, his money, his reputation, his entire future, to that one burning vision. When he faced his 10,000th failure, he didn't see a man who had wasted his life on an impossible dream. He saw a man who had eliminated 10,000 ways that wouldn't work, and was therefore closer than ever to the one way that would. That's not the voice of a man who left himself an escape route. That's the voice of a man who had locked the door behind him and thrown away the key. Andrew Carnegie, arriving in America as a penniless immigrant with nothing but a job in a telegraph office and a mind full of ambition, made an early decision that poverty would never again have the final word in his story. He didn't pursue wealth as a nice idea or a distant dream. He pursued it as an absolute necessity. When he committed to steal, he committed with everything he had. Every dollar he earned, every connection he made, every hour he spent was focused on becoming the Steel King of America. He wasn't diversifying his interests or keeping backup plans. He was concentrating his fire until it became hot enough to melt every obstacle. What is your retreat? And don't you dare lie to me or to yourself. Is it the job you keep as a safety net, even though it dulls your spirit and wastes your potential? Is it the voice you silence because you're afraid of what people might say if you spoke your truth with power? Is it the dream you refuse to pursue because you keep telling yourself you'll start when conditions are perfect. These are not strategies for success. These are shelters for fear. And as long as they exist, you will never walk with the full power that lies dormant within you. You cannot act like a man destined for greatness while your energy is scattered between building your future and preserving your past. You must commit fully, completely, totally. And you must prove that commitment by systematically eliminating every option except victory. It's easy to say, "I'm all in," when you're feeling inspired. It's an entirely different thing to remove every alternative when inspiration fades and reality bites. Abraham Lincoln understood this when he chose to preserve the Union at any cost. He knew the risks were enormous. He knew the price would be paid in blood. He knew that civil war would scar the nation for generations. But he also knew that allowing the country to split would destroy something sacred that could never be rebuilt. So with pen and proclamation, with conviction and courage, he made his stand unmovable and final. There would be no negotiation with secession. There would be no compromise with slavery. The Union would endure, or he would die trying to preserve it. You must now make the same choice in your own life. Not with the drama of war, but with the quiet determination of a man who has finally decided to bet everything on himself. Burn the retreat. Delete the maybe. Eliminate the "if this doesn't work out, I'll just." Those phrases are nothing but permission slips for failure. If you were born for greatness, and I believe you were, then act like it by removing every option except achieving that greatness. Move forward even when progress is slow, even when the path is lonely, even when no one understands your vision, especially then. Because once you make the decision and seal it by eliminating alternatives, something shifts in your psychology. Your mind stops negotiating with itself. Your energy stops scattering in different directions. Your focus becomes laser-sharp. Your spirit hardens into something unbreakable. Say this aloud and mean it with every cell in your body. There is no retreat from my destiny. I have made my decision and sealed it with action. The bridge behind me is ash and smoke. I move forward with finality. I act without the luxury of escape routes. This is not drama or theater. This is discipline of the highest order. Burning bridges isn't loud or showy. It's the quiet decision you make before dawn that today, once again, you will not run from your calling. And if you hold that line long enough, something miraculous happens. Fear stops talking because it finally realizes you're not listening anymore. There is a voice that speaks in every man's mind, a constant companion that whispers in the quiet moments when no one else is around. It speaks when you close the door at night, when you face the mirror in the morning, when results don't come as quickly as expected, when the crowd has gone home and you're left alone with your thoughts. That voice is not always encouraging. It's not always supportive. It's not always truthful. But it is always there, always speaking, always shaping the landscape of your reality. And if you do not deliberately train that voice to speak words of power, it will unconsciously train you to accept limitation. This is the science of autosuggestion, the deliberate and systematic feeding of your subconscious mind with instructions so clear, so consistent, so emotionally charged that they become your automatic response to any situation. The subconscious mind is like fertile soil. It will grow whatever seeds you plant, but it cannot distinguish between weeds and flowers. Your inner voice is the farmer, and every word it speaks plants a seed in that fertile ground. The question is, what kind of harvest are you growing? Let me show you exactly what this means through the lives of men who mastered their inner dialogue. When Henry Ford became famous for saying, "Whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. He wasn't trying to sound clever or profound. He was revealing the exact mechanism he used to build his industrial empire. Ford didn't have more formal education than his competitors. He didn't start with more capital or better connections. He didn't possess some mystical genius that others lacked. But he had trained his inner voice to repeat one phrase over and over with unwavering conviction. It will be done. Not, maybe it will work, or I hope this succeeds, or let's see what happens. Just, it will be done. And because he repeated that phrase with emotional intensity, day after day, year after year, his subconscious mind went to work making it reality. His thoughts became his actions became his habits became his destiny. But here's the critical mistake that destroys most men before they even begin. They speak carelessly to themselves. They allow doubt, worry, sarcasm, and self-deprecation to run on constant repeat in their minds. They joke about being lazy. They rehearse their fears. They practice failure in their imagination. And then they wonder why their external results never match their internal potential. The subconscious mind doesn't understand humor. It doesn't recognize sarcasm. It doesn't filter out harmless, negative comments. When you repeatedly tell yourself you're not good enough, even jokingly, your subconscious hears that as an instruction and begins to make it true. When you rehearse failure scenarios, your mind starts preparing for failure as the most likely outcome. Thomas Edison understood this principle so completely that after thousands of failed attempts to create the incandescent light bulb, when a reporter asked how he found the strength to continue, he replied without hesitation, "I haven't failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." But recognize what that response really was. It wasn't just optimism or positive thinking. It was programming. It was a mental script so deeply ingrained, so consistently repeated, that failure literally could not take root in his consciousness. Every time he spoke those words, he reinforced his identity as a man who makes progress even through apparent setbacks. Andrew Carnegie took this principle even further. He instructed every young man under his mentorship to write their chief aim on paper and read it aloud twice daily. Once immediately upon waking, once just before sleep. He believed that a man could become absolutely unstoppable if he simply repeated the right thoughts often enough with sufficient emotional intensity. Why did Carnegie insist on speaking the words aloud rather than just thinking them silently? Because the voice you speak with becomes the voice you hear. The voice you hear becomes the voice you believe. And the voice you believe shapes every aspect of your reality. So let me ask you directly, what have you been telling yourself in the private moments when no one else is listening? When progress is slow and results are invisible, what does your inner voice whisper? Do you hear, "I'm tired of this," or "This probably won't work," or "Maybe I'm not cut out for this," or "I'm just trying my best"? These are not harmless phrases. They are weapons of self-destruction. Every time you repeat them, you drive them deeper into your subconscious programming. But today, that programming ends. Today you take conscious control of the voice in your head. It begins with iron discipline. The discipline to speak to yourself with the same respect and expectation you would demand from anyone else. Every morning, before the world floods your mind with its version of what's possible, you must give yourself your version. Stand before the mirror and declare with absolute authority, "I act before fear can speak. I do not drift through this day. I dominate it. I do not hope for success. I expect it because I create it." And again at night, in those final moments before sleep when your subconscious mind is most receptive, you speak your vision, your identity, your next move into that fertile soil. Why? Because the mind remembers most clearly what it hears last, and those final thoughts before sleep become the blueprint for tomorrow's reality. This is not motivational theory. This is neurological fact. This is how the brain creates neural pathways, how thoughts become automatic, how the temporary becomes permanent. Charles M. Schwab, at the height of his leadership in American industry, was known for his unshakable optimism even in the face of devastating setbacks. But that optimism wasn't a personality trait he was born with. It was a mental discipline he practiced religiously. He consciously avoided negative language, redirected conversations away from problems toward solutions, and trained himself to reframe every challenge as an opportunity. That mental strength didn't happen by accident. It came from years of repetition, from the daily decision to feed his mind thoughts of possibility rather than limitation. Now you must create your own script, not generic affirmations copied from a book, but your words, your beliefs, your vision written in the language of absolute certainty. Let me help you begin. I do not explain my power to those who fear it. I execute it. My actions train my mind to expect victory. I am not waiting for motivation to find me. I create momentum through discipline. My belief is my weapon, and I sharpen it daily through repetition. Write these words. Speak them every day. Let them replace the old, defeated programming that has run your life for too long. And here's what will happen. That inner voice that once wavered will begin to speak with steel. It will become clear, focused, unshakable. And when that transformation occurs in your mind, everything in your external world must follow. You will no longer talk yourself out of taking action. You will talk yourself into motion. You will no longer entertain excuses. You will interrupt them with new instructions. You will no longer question your identity. You will reinforce it with every word you speak to yourself. This is how you kill doubt, not by hoping it will leave, but by drowning it in truth. Not by fighting against the old voice, but by installing a new one. And once your subconscious accepts that new voice as the dominant program, doubt will knock at your door and find no one home, because your mind will be too focused, too certain, too trained in the language of victory to even hear limitations whisper. Make this practice your sacred ritual, your daily act of rebellion against a world that profits from your small thinking. Because repetition is the mother of all skill, including the skill of believing in yourself so completely that the universe has no choice but to make room for your expansion. There comes a decisive moment in every man's life when he must choose between two masters. Will I be governed by how I feel, or will I be led by what I have decided? This choice will determine whether you live as a prisoner of your emotions or as the architect of your destiny. Most men, without realizing it, have surrendered their lives to the tyranny of feeling. They act when they feel confident and hesitate when they feel uncertain. They speak when they feel brave and hide when they feel afraid. They pursue their dreams when they feel motivated and abandon them when they feel discouraged. They live at the mercy of internal weather patterns that change as unpredictably as storms. But the builders of history, the men who carved their names into the granite of achievement, operated by an entirely different compass. They were not governed by moods or opinions or fear dressed up as logic. They moved by faith, not religious faith necessarily, but the faith that comes from decision, from commitment, from choosing to trust what they had determined rather than what they felt in any given moment. They didn't wait to feel brave before acting bravely. They acted first, and courage followed. They didn't need to feel certain before moving with certainty. They moved with decision, and confidence came in the movement. Let me make this crystal clear. Faith is not some mystical energy floating in the clouds waiting for you to catch it. Faith is a mental attitude, a muscle that grows stronger with exercise, a discipline that must be practiced daily. It is built the same way you would build a wall, brick by brick, through repetition, decision, and the absolute refusal to waver when pressure mounts. Most importantly, faith is a choice. You do not need to feel it to choose it. You do not need external evidence to exercise it. You choose to believe, and then you act from that belief until reality catches up to your conviction. Henry Ford embodied this principle completely. He was told repeatedly by engineers, financiers, and industry experts that his ideas were impossible. The public would never want automobiles, they said. An 8-cylinder engine in one block couldn't be manufactured, they insisted. Mass production would never work, they argued. And yet, every time opposition arose, Ford responded with the same unshakable command: build it anyway. Why? Because his faith wasn't based on external validation or popular opinion. It was rooted in an internal decision that had been made once and would never be unmade. Ford didn't always feel confident. There were moments of doubt, nights of worry, days when progress seemed impossible. But he had trained himself to lead from decision rather than emotion. He felt the uncertainty and moved anyway. He acknowledged the doubt and chose belief anyway. He recognized the fear and took action anyway. Thomas Edison lived by the same law. After failing thousands of times in his quest to create the electric light, he could have easily felt defeated, discouraged, or ready to quit. Those feelings would have been natural, even reasonable. But Edison had already decided that success was inevitable. And once that decision was installed in his consciousness, temporary emotions lost their power to derail him. Each failure wasn't evidence that he should stop. It was proof that he was making progress toward the one solution that would work. That's what faith looks like in action. Not the absence of doubt, but the decision to act in spite of it. Now let me speak directly to the lie that has paralyzed more potential than any other force in human history. Most men confuse emotion with guidance. They believe that if something feels heavy or difficult, it's a sign they're on the wrong path. If it feels uncertain or challenging, they assume they should stop and reconsider. But listen carefully. Discomfort is not a red light. It's the toll you pay to travel the road that leads to greatness. Every man who has ever accomplished something significant has had to walk through the valley of uncertainty, doubt, and emotional resistance. Abraham Lincoln understood this truth when he took the oath of office as president during the most turbulent time in American history. The nation was fracturing, slavery was tearing the country apart, and war seemed inevitable. His cabinet was divided, the press was hostile, and the weight of preserving the Union rested entirely on his shoulders. Lincoln didn't feel ready for that burden. He didn't feel certain about the path forward. He didn't feel the unanimous support of the people. But he had already decided that slavery must end, and the Union must endure. That decision, made in the depths of his being, gave him the strength to sign the Emancipation Proclamation not because he felt popular support, but because he believed in the mission. Emotion may feel real and immediate, but it lies more often than it tells the truth. It speaks in the language of the past, echoing your old programming, your former limitations, your previous defeats. But faith, true faith born from decision, speaks from the future. It speaks from the man you have decided to become, not the man you used to be. That's why I emphasize repetition with such intensity, because repetition doesn't just create habits, it creates faith. The more you speak belief into existence, the more you act from that belief, the more it becomes your automatic response to any challenge. And once faith becomes your default setting, emotion loses its power to control your destiny. So I ask you directly, who is running your life today? Is it the man who acts from fire, from vision, from unshakable purpose? Or is it the man who waits until he feels good before making a move, who hesitates until everything feels perfect, who needs external validation before he believes in himself? You must make this decision once and for all. I lead from faith, not from feeling. I am not a slave to my emotions. I command them. I do not wait to feel ready. I act, and readiness follows. That means you show up even when you're tired. You speak your truth even when your voice trembles. You follow through on commitments even when results haven't arrived yet. You keep your word to yourself, especially when no one else is watching. Let me give you a practical framework for living from faith rather than feeling. Every morning, before your emotions have a chance to whisper their familiar doubts, declare your beliefs out loud. Not what you feel, but what you choose to believe. I act before I feel ready, because readiness is built through action. I am not governed by the weather of emotion. I create my own climate through decision. I walk by faith because the man I am becoming is already real in my mind, and my mind is where reality begins. Then move immediately. Don't debate, don't negotiate, don't check in with your feelings. You build faith not by thinking about it, but by acting as if it were already your natural state. And yes, you will feel resistance. The old programming will rise up and demand to be heard. Doubt will knock at your door. Fear will try to reclaim its throne. But these are just ghosts of who you used to be. You do not negotiate with ghosts. You do not give them a seat at the table. You replace them with fire, with action, with the relentless repetition of who you have decided to be. This is the same process Charles M. Schwab used when building the foundations of U.S. Steel. He wasn't always certain about market conditions or industry trends, but he carried himself with absolute certainty because he understood a fundamental law of leadership. People don't follow uncertainty. They follow conviction. And the only way to develop unshakable conviction is to practice it daily, in small moments and large decisions alike. You train yourself to move without needing to feel perfect first. Say this now with the force of a man taking an oath. I do not trust the voice of emotion when it contradicts the voice of purpose. I do not wait to feel powerful. I act until power becomes my natural state. I lead myself from decision, not from the shifting sands of how I feel in any given moment. Repeat these words every morning until they become the operating system of your mind. Let them replace the old programming that once convinced you to pause, to doubt, to wait for better circumstances. Let them become the soundtrack that plays while you take action. Because the man who leads from emotion will always be led by fear, but the man who leads from faith, from decision made sacred through repetition, he becomes a force of nature. He becomes unstoppable. He becomes inevitable. There is a law that governs all human progress, and it is this: indecision is the seedbed where fear grows strongest. It is not failure that paralyzes a man's potential. It is not rejection or setbacks or temporary defeat. It is the simple, devastating refusal to choose a direction and commit to it with finality. No man who hesitates can ever truly lead, not others, and most critically, not himself. He will be led by circumstances, by other people's opinions, by the momentum of yesterday's choices, by the inertia of mediocrity. But the man who decides swiftly and acts immediately, that man becomes a force that shapes his world, rather than being shaped by it. I discovered this truth in every successful man I studied. They all possess the habit of making decisions quickly and changing them slowly, if at all. This wasn't recklessness or impulsiveness. This was the recognition that perfect information never comes, that ideal timing is a myth, and that the act of deciding creates its own momentum. Let me show you what this looks like through the lens of real achievement. When Henry Ford's engineers returned to him repeatedly with the same message, that casting an 8-cylinder engine in one solid block was impossible, they expected him to accept their verdict and move on to more realistic alternatives. Instead, Ford looked at them with the unshakable certainty of a man who had already decided the outcome and said simply, "Produce it anyway." Not once, not twice, but every time they brought him evidence of impossibility. He didn't say, "Let me think about it," or "Maybe we should explore other options." He decided, and that decision became law. The world does not yield to cleverness or credentials or careful planning. It yields to certainty. It bends to the man who knows what he wants and moves toward it without wavering. Thomas Edison operated by the same principle. Imagine the mental pressure of failing 10,000 times at anything. Most men would have quit before 10 failures, let alone 10,000. They would have doubted themselves, questioned their approach, or asked for permission to try something else entirely. But Edison had made his decision before the first experiment began. I will create the electric light. That decision was final, carved in stone, non-negotiable. Because the choice was made once and sealed with total commitment, every failure became simply another step toward inevitable success. You must now apply this same law to your own life. Stop leaving back doors open in your mind. Stop entertaining the word maybe. Stop debating your own destiny. Decide with finality, and then let the path reveal itself through movement. Charles M. Schwab, when Andrew Carnegie chose him to lead the massive consolidation that became U.S. Steel, was not the oldest candidate or the most experienced. But when Carnegie offered him the position, Schwab didn't ask for time to consider, didn't form a committee to analyze the opportunity, didn't request a detailed plan. He said yes immediately and figured out the details while moving. That's how true momentum is built, through the decision to act followed immediately by action itself. You move, and clarity comes in the movement. You execute, and the mind follows your lead. Most men never grasp this principle. They think clarity must come before action, that certainty must precede commitment. But it works in reverse. Action creates clarity, movement generates certainty, and execution builds the very confidence they thought they needed to begin. Every time you hesitate, you send a signal to your subconscious mind. I don't really believe in myself. But every time you act decisively, even when you don't have all the answers, you reinforce the identity of a man who does what he says he will do. And gradually, your entire being, your posture, your voice, your presence, your results, begins to reflect that new identity. So I challenge you now. What have you left undecided? What path have you postponed while waiting for more time, more information, more courage, more support? And what has that delay already cost you in terms of momentum, confidence, and opportunity? Because indecision is never neutral. It is expensive. It robs you of time that can never be recovered. It drains energy that could fuel achievement. It erodes confidence that could power breakthrough. It wastes opportunities that may never return. But you can end this expensive habit right now, in this moment, with words that burn bridges to hesitation forever. I do not wait. I act. I do not hesitate. I execute. I do not consult fear before making moves. My decisions are final. My movement is immediate. My word to myself is sacred law. That declaration is not empty bravado. It is identity being forged in the fire of commitment. You don't try to become decisive. You declare that you are decisive, and then prove it through action. Let me give you a framework that will transform decision-making from burden into superpower. First, make your decision quickly, from a place of purpose, not emotion. What serves your vision? What moves you toward the man you've decided to become? Choose that path without debate. Second, move immediately. Do something today, anything, that confirms and solidifies the decision. Send the email, make the call, take the first step. Action seals decision and makes retreat impossible. Third, refuse to reopen the decision unless genuinely new facts emerge. Not new feelings, not new fears, not new opinions from people who weren't consulted when the choice was made. New facts only. Fourth, reaffirm daily through repetition. I am a man who moves with certainty. I am a man who leads through decision. I am a man whose word is his bond, especially the word he gives to himself. Even Abraham Lincoln, in the darkest hours of the Civil War, operated from this principle. He didn't have popular support for the Emancipation Proclamation. He didn't have unanimous backing from his cabinet. He didn't have clear signs that victory was assured. But he had decided that slavery must end and the Union must be preserved. That decision, made in the depths of his being and sealed through action, gave him strength that no external circumstance could shake. Not criticism, not opposition, not the enormous pressure of leading a nation through its bloodiest chapter. The same power that sustained Lincoln through national crisis is available to you right now. But only if you're willing to shut the door on delay, slam it on hesitation, and lock it against the temptation to reconsider what you've already decided. Say it one final time with the force of absolute commitment. I decide quickly because perfect information never comes. I act immediately because momentum is built through motion. I do not explain who I am. I demonstrate it through decisive action. Now stop talking and start moving. Choose the thing you've been avoiding. Make the call you've been postponing. Take the step you've been delaying. Because the man who moves first doesn't just win. He becomes the kind of man who can never lose, because he never allows himself to be paralyzed by the luxury of endless options. The man who decides and acts decisively is no longer at the mercy of circumstances. He creates circumstances. He doesn't wait for the right moment. He makes every moment right through the power of committed action. Now we arrive at the moment when doubt must die. Not gradually, not gently, not through patient understanding, but with the swift finality of a man who has had enough. Doubt is not something you manage or cope with or slowly overcome. It is something you execute, completely, permanently, without mercy or appeal. You must understand this. Doubt is not truth speaking to you. It is not wisdom. It is not protection. It is habit wearing the mask of intelligence, fear dressed in the clothes of realism. It is a mental routine you have practiced so obsessively that you began mistaking it for guidance. But doubt was never your counselor. It was never your friend. It was your saboteur, whispering poison in your ear while pretending to keep you safe. And if you don't name it for what it truly is, betrayal of your own potential, you'll keep calling it being practical or thinking things through, when what you're really doing is choosing limitation over liberation. The decision ends here. Doubt dies today. Not tomorrow, when you feel stronger. Not next week, when circumstances improve. Not someday, when you have more confidence. Right now, in this moment, you draw the line that doubt cannot cross. Let me show you how the giants of achievement handled this moment of reckoning. Abraham Lincoln faced doubt from every direction, from his cabinet, from the press, from his own generals, from the divided nation he led. The weight of preserving the Union while ending slavery could have crushed any man under the mountain of uncertainty. But Lincoln chose belief every single day. In the quiet moments when no one was watching, he reaffirmed his purpose. He wrote letters he never sent, pouring his doubts onto paper and then burning them. He walked alone under stars, not seeking answers from heaven, but strengthening his own resolve through solitude and repetition. In those sacred moments between doubt and decision, Lincoln chose to believe in the mission rather than the obstacles. Not because he felt certain about the outcome, but because he had made certainty about his identity. He was the man chosen to hold the nation together, and he would be that man regardless of how impossible it seemed. Andrew Carnegie, born into poverty in a one-room cottage in Scotland, stood in a world dominated by titans and tycoons who had every advantage he lacked. He had no family wealth, no prestigious education, no powerful connections, but he carried one weapon that made him unstoppable: definiteness of purpose, backed by relentless repetition. Carnegie wrote his chief aim and spoke it aloud every morning and every night until doubt simply had no room to breathe in his mental atmosphere. He didn't argue with limitation. He drowned it in possibility. He didn't fight fear. He suffocated it with faith, repeated until it became stronger than any external opposition. That's not positive thinking or wishful dreaming. That's mental warfare. That's how a telegraph operator became the richest man in the world, by making his internal voice louder than the world's voice of limitation. Henry Ford faced waves of opposition that would have broken most men's spirits. The press mocked his vision. Engineers said his ideas were impossible. The government tried to stop him. Competitors tried to destroy him. But none of their doubt ever penetrated his consciousness, because his internal repetition was thunderous, constant, unbreakable. He told himself what was possible over and over and over until that belief crystallized into something harder than steel. And that steel built an empire that transformed not just an industry, but the entire world. You are not different from these men. The only thing separating you from their level of achievement is what you allow to play on repeat in your mind. And I tell you with absolute authority, doubt is not real. It is shadow, echo, ghost. It is yesterday's programming trying to control today's possibilities. So you must now overwrite it completely. Not with hope, not with optimism, not with gentle encouragement, but with identity hammered into unshakable form through repetition. Speak this aloud with the force of a man reclaiming his birthright. I do not argue with doubt. I execute it. I do not let fear speak twice. I silence it with action so decisive that it forgets my address. I do not shrink from my own power. I expand into it like fire consuming oxygen. Because every time you rehearse belief instead of doubt, your nervous system adapts. Every time you speak victory instead of defeat, your subconscious mind rewrites the code. Every time you act from faith instead of fear, you strengthen neural pathways that make courage your default response. It doesn't matter how long you've been doubting. It doesn't matter how deep those grooves of limitation have been carved into your thinking. Repetition rewrites everything. But doubt will not die quietly. It is an addiction that has been feeding off your potential for years, and it will fight for its life. It will whisper again in the quiet hours. It will return in moments of fatigue. It will try to reclaim its throne during the inevitable pauses between progress. And when it does, you do not engage. You do not debate. You do not give it the dignity of consideration. You return immediately to your script. I do not live in hesitation. I move in fire. My belief is louder than my fear. My repetition is my shield. My identity is my weapon. Let this truth burn into your consciousness. You are no longer allowed to be the man who doubts. That version of yourself is dead, buried, gone forever. We do not negotiate with corpses. We do not make room for ghosts. We do not check in on the dead when times get challenging. He had his chance, and he wasted it. Now it's your turn. The turn of the man who has decided that doubt has no place in a mind destined for greatness. And this new man, the one rising from the ashes of limitation, he walks differently. He doesn't need to feel ready before he moves. He moves because he gave his word. He doesn't need to see the complete plan. He trusts the law of momentum. He doesn't fear failure because his identity is rooted in action, not outcome. So declare it with finality that echoes in the depths of your soul. I do not need more time. I need more fire. I do not entertain doubt. I enforce belief. I do not delay my destiny. I dominate every moment between now and its fulfillment. Let your new identity be sealed through repetition so constant, so fierce, so emotionally charged that your subconscious mind surrenders completely to this new programming. Repeat it until doubt doesn't know where to find you anymore. Repeat it until fear forgets your phone number. Repeat it until the old voice is completely drowned in the symphony of your new power. Because the man who wins doesn't need 1,000 strategies. He doesn't need perfect conditions. He doesn't need everyone's approval. He just needs to know who he is and walk in that knowing with such unshakable conviction that the universe itself moves aside to make room for his advance. So walk. Walk like the man you've decided to be. Walk like victory is not just possible, but inevitable. Walk like doubt never had a legitimate claim on your mind. And don't look back. The man you used to be isn't coming with you. Let him die in the silence of your new certainty. Let the man of fire, the man of faith, the man of unbreakable will rise in his place, and never, ever look back. This is your moment. This is your choice. This is your liberation. Repeat this speech not once, but daily, until every word becomes bone and blood and breath, until doubt becomes a foreign language you no longer speak, until belief becomes so automatic that you forget you ever lived any other way. The transformation is complete. The old self is dead. The new self is born. Now go and prove it with every step you take, every word you speak, every decision you make. The world is waiting for the man you have finally decided to become.